chairs the Woodbridge Sustainability Committee, and today we are hosting Domingo Medina, who is one of my favorite lecturers. Don't tell the other ones, but he really is one of my favorites. I have seen this is probably, I think, our third time we posted you, and every time I learn more and more about composting, and he just is a wealth of information. So, our Woodbridge Sustainability Committee, the only other member I have with me so far here is BJ Ahern, and we are expecting more people. Diana was just here, she just disappeared. There's another one coming and going. Diana McCarthy is here, McCarthy Curry, I'm saying that backwards, is here, and then we're expecting Laura as well. So, and then we also have Sustainable Bethany. Shout out to Bethany, woo woo, who co-hosts these lectures with us. If you haven't yet, check out Blue Earth Composting, but after today, you're going to be able to compost yourself, so you won't need to pay somebody else to take your compost. But in case it overwhelms you, you can check out the company that will pick it up. Both in Woodbridge, and we're working on part of Bethany as well. And also, if you haven't yet, Heat Smart Woodbridge. Sign up, get your energy audit, save money, save energy. You can't lose by doing this. And they donate a little bit to the town each time somebody signs up, which is very exciting. All right, and the biggest, most exciting thing ever is Woodbridge Earth Day is coming next month, April 26th. Mark your calendars, be there. Oh, hi, Laura. Laura, say hi. Laura, here's another member of our Sustainability Committee. Woodbridge Earth, Diana, I introduced you, you weren't here. I'm here, Diana. Woodbridge Earth Day, we're going to have so many things. If you came last year, you saw how awesome it was. If you didn't come, this one's going to be even more awesome. We've got all sorts of exhibits. We've got food trucks, beer garden, Cyril the Sorcerer, face painting, a fix-it station, antiques appraisal, clothing-free cycle, wood litter community cleanup, so many things. This year, the one thing we're doing a little different, if you did come last year, we're doing a lot of our extended recycling the week after. So you sign up for it or get the information on it and come drop off your stuff at the transfer station the next week. So please don't bring your mattress to actual Earth Day. We will have nowhere to put it. So you can bring it to the transfer station. All right.
If you have questions, catch one of us at the end of this.
Catch one of us.
So we can
There's
tell you
also
lots of
flyers
great
in the back. You can QR code them just like how it's here too. You can find out more. Check out the website, woodbridgeearthday.org. All right. Without further ado, Domingo Medina. He is amazing in every way, but also leads Peels and Wheels, which is the coolest thing I've ever heard of. And I will leave it to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm always like the opportunity to talk to people about the composting. It's something that I've been doing for 11 years now. I'm the founder and director of operation of Peels and Wheels Composting. This is the logo. That everything that goes around comes around for the good or for the bad. So that tells me that wherever we do for our place, whatever we can do to regenerate our place, it's just going to go for the health of all of us. And that's true for the other way around. Each time we are trashing, we are degrading, we are exploiting, we are trashing our place, that's going to go back to us sooner or later. But anyhow, I've been involved in composting for a while now. I have a service down in New Haven where we collect organic waste through a system of bikes and trailers. We have 5 routes right now. There are more than 500 people, households that are involved in the whole project. And then we bring this to a farm. We used to bring it to Phoenix Press down in Fairhaven. But that place is closed now, and now we're working at Common Ground High School. The whole idea of composting is that, when I started all this, I learned by walking my place is to learn where our trash was going. And one thing that opened my mind is when we visited the sewage system down in New Haven, that every time we flush our toilets, or when we are in our, taking a shower, all that water goes to a sewage system. And we went to visit there one day, and then I saw how they separated the solids from the water. The water got chlorinated and thrown into the sound where we bathe in the summertime, and all the trash, whatever was being burned in big incinerators. I said, what that was very eye-opening to me. So if that's happening with our wastewater, what's happening with the trash? And then I learned, well, at that time when I started, we still had landfills. So, you had trucks going around our town, picking up all this food waste, all this organic waste, and basically taking it to a landfill. And then I learned that we had municipal incinerators, so we were burning all this stuff. Yeah, we were generating electricity, but we were also polluting. And then you say, listen, this is not a solution. We are just pushing the wrinkle, and we're going to be paying for that. And so that time I met Rebecca Klein, that was at the head of New Haven Farms, who was a very important non-for-profit down in New Haven, where they had several agricultural plots around Fairhaven, where they had a health program, a wellness program, to be able to provide, nutrition, agriculture training, nutrition education, and cooking, also demonstration, to people that had pre-diabetes or diabetic conditions. And they were building farms on top of asphalt, and they're growing food in a very important way. And I saw these packs and packs of compost in bags that they were buying, and I said, why don't we create a program where people that are members of the farm can pay for a fee, where we collect some of that organic waste from the household, bring it to the farm, make compost, give compost back to the people who want it, and the rest will serve to build up the soils in the farm. And that's how it started. And we have Celine here that was part of that program as a big cooking educator on that community. And that was a very important piece that lasted for some good time. And that's how I started. So now, I've been doing this professionally for a long time, and I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned about composting. So who does here composting? My goodness gracious. I mean, you actually do compost, not that collect it and send it elsewhere, you actually do compost. Good. Are you proud of your compost?
Yes.
You say, you can actually eat this, no, that's sorry. You actually use it. Okay. So that's very, not very people feel comfortable with their compost. And sometimes it's because, there's a generational gap of what this country used to do up to the 50s, before the boom of the suburb and so on, where people actually did composting. And now, slowly, that knowledge is being picked up again, when a new generation of people are becoming much more aware of the importance of soil health. And compost is a very important aspect of that. If you haven't heard about soil health practices, where people talk about regenerating the soil, about cover cropping, crop rotation, no-tilling, compost is one of those very important elements. And I think it's one of the most important ones that I think people don't value as much. Anyhow, so this is a pyramid that I always like to talk about. It's the hierarchy of reduced food waste, and it's gone. So I don't know why it's gone.
You got composted.
It got composted.
It was a very tenuous situation.
Okay.
Let's think about it. It seems to want to warm up quite a bit.
Maybe you just haven't time back there.
Yeah, I wonder if it was an issue that I touched the
I know,
cable.
I think it was.
You can do this. You can do this. Well, let's see if it's warming up. The point here of that inverted pyramid is how do we manage our food waste? Things that we come from our home, or even from our food takeout, that we don't eat. What do we do with it? The tendency is just to put it into a bag and throw it into the trash. But the idea of this inverted pyramid is, listen, if you cannot preserve it for you to eat it the next day, can you give it to animals? Can you give it to other people? Can you source, when you're preparing your food, can you do it in a way that you don't waste it? So it's also about planning and how to preserve food. But if you always have that overflow, you can always try to compost it at home. if you cannot compost at home because you have the time, the knowledge, the space, can you find a community garden that can do it for you? If not, is there a service around that can pick up that compost and make compost? Or a farm probably that might be able to receive the material. What you want to avoid is the landfilling, the incineration of this material that's happening. Right now we have an alternative, the anaerobic digesters, but for me it's like the municipal incinerators. They certainly capture methane to be able to produce gas, but it's the output, what's called the digest that coming from the anaerobic digesters are not readily available to be used at the farm for agriculture, for soil. They claim they do, but we know for a fact, because of the way they do the decomposition of that organic matter, is under anaerobic conditions. And therefore you have a lot of alcohols, you have a lot of pathogens, you have a lot of issues of that digest that still needs to be decomposed. And I still haven't seen the first bag of compost that are being produced through that. I know they produce some liquids, but I think we are still far as. So that's fine, that's an alternative, but I prefer to keep it locally, to capture that food waste as a resource, to be able to minimize environmental pollution, to enhance our soils, and in my case, to generate jobs. When you hear about the green economy, I'm the closest thing to of what a green economy looks like. Is people engaged in sustainability? Is people engaged in enhancing their place and dealing with our externalities, everything that we produce that are generating a lot of issues. Anyhow, so can somebody here tell me what composting is? Anybody? Any idea what composting is? When you say I'm composting, what are you talking about? Yeah.
Well, I take the food waste,
Uh-huh.
the leftovers and whatnot that, usually would go to the trash. And if it's organic, if it's fruits, vegetables, or I put it in a separate spot. And I put it outside, no dairy products, no meat. And I put it outside, and then you pile up some leaves on top of it, and
Voila.
there it goes. Voila,
Ta-da.
great, it's easy. Love it. And I get to see all the critters that come by.
And you say, okay. So you're describing what you actually do.
Yes.
But what is composting in the sense of what happens to that organic matter? What does it happen?
It breaks down
Breaks down?
Breaks down.
Okay.
naturally.
Breaks down naturally.
Decompose.
Okay. So there are two concepts here. One is decomposition, another one is composting. The decomposition is what naturally happens. When you go to a forest, you see all those leaves that have fallen down into the ground, and things started to break down. All that woody material, all those leaves, that they basically break down through microbial activities. When we talk about composting, it's us creating the conditions for decomposition to happen. It's to understanding what makes this. It's back.
Voila.
Hold on, don't touch anything, don't
Nobody-
touch anything.
No,
I have a wireless. Gently.
So we are the ones that create the condition for that happens. Depending on how we manage those conditions, things can be decomposed very quickly or can decompose very slowly.
Just touch this. Don't touch that.
Cool.
Here,
Okay.
just touch this.
So I'll talk about that, but this is very important. It's my concern as a composter. It might be different from why you're doing composting. In my case, I don't want that food organic waste to go and get burned. There's a lot of conditions of asthma and pulmonary cancer in New Haven, looks like in Bridgeport and New London. I'm not saying because of incineration, but if you already have a sick population that it's vulnerable and you are burning and polluting, certainly incineration is not a solution. We also have issues of things like lead and arsenic in our soils, and that's why the recommendation of raising beds to be able to grow food for those that you're interested. We don't have truly composting in New Haven. Now it's picking up because we have a service like Blue Earth Compost that is willing to drive from all Hartford with a truck and pick up from wherever. And they're doing it successfully, but they are not actually composting. They are going to the anaerobic digester. They're buying a piece of land now, and they're going to jump into composting. But still, they have to drive, how many hours to get there. And the other thing that's happening is that, our soils are being depleted. The percentage of organic matter in a soil for growing food is being depleted over time. If you go to a farm around here and it's on a rainy day, seek and see if there's any erosion happening. And mostly you observe this in places where are not organic farms that are basically depleting the soil because they are not investing in the soil biology of their place. And when you see that, you'll see it on the rivers, you'll see it on the runoff of all that suspended solids. So that's a concern. How can we help farms also to keep regenerating their soil? And composting is a way. Another issue is the nutrient value of our food. The USDA have been monitoring the nutrient value of our food since the 1950s until now. And it's incredible that we have lost so much nutrient value over time to the point that now we have to, we have to take vitamins to be able to complement things that we're not eating because it's not in the food. And it's not the food, it's because it's not in the soil. So part of composting is how do we enhance our soil? And that's an important motivation, at least for me. And this is how we used to do it before. If you go to New Haven, I don't know here, but you'll find in many houses the way we used to collect compost was called garbage. And of course, at that time, garbage was the same with trash. You didn't have plastics, you didn't have metals. It was very easy, and they would put it into these containers that were, in the soil with a very heavy lid, so no vermin could go in. And then you have to lift it and pull the stuff out, carry it and put it on a metal carriage that was pulled by horses, and these were taken to piggeries. There were 3 piggeries around New Haven that was feeding, people that were in poorhouses. They were taking care of the pigs, they were eating the pigs, and they were selling the pigs. And the USDA actually produced material of how to feed garbage to pigs. And they had the measure of the quality of the food, of the fat and the meat from those pigs. And of course, all that broken down because somebody decided that landfills were a better solution. They were more neat to deal with our food waste. So landfills were created, then became the municipal incinerations, and now they're now digesters. And now to the point that now we actually export food waste to Ohio and Pennsylvania and other places. So somebody else, some other community is receiving our externalities. So for me, it's what can I do to keep those resources in it, and again, mitigate environmental pollution, enhance the soils, and create some jobs. So there's some of the things that I want to outline that I'm not going to get into, I'll get explained. Here is a question for you. This is how my mind works. I have a lot of things in my head, and it's hard to get organized. But the first question that I just have for you that's most important on this graphic is why composting? What's your motivation? Because that will make a difference. If you just want to make waste management, you just put it in the trash and you take it away. But if you want to do something with it because it's going to enhance your garden, it's going to improve your farmland, you want to generate that resource to generate benefit from that resource, then you have to ask yourself, how can I do this in a way that will create those benefits? So this is a concept of what it means to do composting. It's a process, it's a biological decomposition of the organic matter, of all our animal and plant-based material. And it's being done by microorganisms. And when you go through the process of composting, you're going to have a biological stable, pathogen-free, humus-rich substance suitable for soils and growing plants. Okay? And you do it under special conditions. You do it under special condition of aeration, special condition of moisture, and that will result in a whole process that I'm going to explain later on. But basically, we're feeding microorganisms. The way I was taught in the beginning is that you just mix browns and greens, and the miracle happens. And then I learned, listen, it's about feeding microorganisms. They are the ones that are going to be responsible for that breakdown through those mechanisms. And then I got enamored. Listen, I'm dealing with something that I can't see, but if I do it right, I'm going to have the best compost and generate those benefits. This keeps changing to me. But again, it's a process of creating the optimum conditions for rapid decomposition of organic residues. Again, whatever we do, we can accelerate that process or we can delay it, and I think we'll be fine. So we're dealing with part of, a very minimum part of soil. Soil is, when you talk about soil, we're talking about mineral content, we're talking about organic matter, we're talking about water and airspace. So organic matter is only 5% of what's in the soil. It's a very minimum part of the soil horizon where we grow our food, where life thrives, where plants get to grow. And in that 5%, you can see that you have a lot of 65 of that is just humus, carbon-based material that have been degraded. But a lot of it has to do with microorganisms, dead and alive microorganisms that are building the soil, and where most of the nutrients are held in the body of the microorganism. So you want to build soil, you have to have microorganisms. Okay? And these are some of the benefits that I like to highlight. When we do composting, we are supplying our soil or organic matter. That's important. We are supplying beneficial microorganisms to the soil. We are also providing food for microbes that are in the soil. We are balancing the pH, the acidity of our soil, depending on what we want to grow. We're also making nutrient availability for the soil. We don't need truly fertilizers. A lot of minerals, we have a lot of minerals on our soil, and sometimes they are not available. And the only way to make them available is to have a good soil biology, living and active and viable, that can tap into that through the symbiotic relationship that they have with plants. Sometimes when we put artificial fertilizers, inorganic fertilizers, yes, we feed the plant, but we're overpassing a mechanism that's of very much importance, and we're killing the soil. And that's when you start seeing this yellow soil. You go to a farm, so look at the color of the soil. If it's not brown or dark brown, it's more on the yellowish side, there's not much microbial activity going on. And probably I would think they're feeding a lot of inorganic fertilizer. So that's something to observe. The thing with compost is that you retain also nutrients, and and that nutrient will be slowly released into the soil. You can also suppress disease by the function of microorganisms through competition and inhibition and consumption can suppress a lot of pathogens. Building soil structure, these beautiful aggregates. When you go to a soil farm, check the soil. If you have these nice aggregates, that tells you that something's good happening there. Those aggregates helps to maintain niches for microbes to be viable, to retain water, and for air to be able to circulate. Those are very important things. And the other thing is that we can actually inactivate toxins like lead and arsenic and other things that make them less bioavailable through compost. So there's a lot of benefits, and that's why I try to do the best compost I can do. And this is just a beautiful drawing of the multiple microorganisms of different sizes that are into what's called the soil food web. Several trophic layers of food chains, of prey and predator relationships that are important. And these are in the rhizosphere around the roots of the plants, and they play an immense role in the nutrient cycling of the soil. You can see in your compost pile, now that we have microscopy, now that we have DNA analysis, we can able to see who are they, in what proportion, what's their name, what are the roles and the function, and we know for a fact that what's happening is that this predator-prey relationship, you have different trophic levels eating the smaller ones, and because they can't uptake so much nutrient, they end up pooping a lot of that material that they becomes a nutrient that is available. There's an available form for plants. So these ecosystem levels are very important. We're very much aware of the ones at the above ground, but the below ground we are not much aware. So anything that can facilitate that mechanism to happen, it's just going to increase the quality of our soils. And these are some of the benefits that are known. You have organisms that fix nitrogen. You have those that can solubilize phosphate. It can, help in the decomposition of organic matter. There's a lot of application now on bioremediation, hormone secretion, and soil structuring. And these more and more we get to know. And there's now a whole movement of people getting to microscopy, observing, and making sure what's happening with their compost. And this is an example of an aggregate, of those little crumbs that you might see in your soil. When you take a soil and it's very powdery, that is very loose, there's not much organic matter going on. There's no a lot of soil microorganisms going on, and you have to be able to enhance that by providing organic matter that has good soil biology. And that's just a description of a little clump of what I tried to see. Type of composting method. There are many, many out there, and I'm thinking, what can I have in my backyard? Some people have single bins. Some people do trenches, where you just open a trench and put food and then cap it. Others have heat mounds, straw bales, the 3-bin system that are pretty well known. Agriculture. There are many, many ways, but they all follow the same principles that I'm going to go. Here's about your energy levels, on how much you love to be involved in a process like that. The systems are simpler than others, and of course, if you plan, what's your plan for the use of your own compost? Oops. These are just another examples that are out there that people now are using. There's something called the bioreactor Johnson-Su that has a nice recipe to create very fungal dominated compost for farms. There's a 20 bucket method. These are all batches, large batches systems that can be used in farms. The bokashi, that's anaerobic fermentation, a Korean method of decomposing organic matter that then after that needs to be composted. And vermicompost is another way. And these all systems have pros and cons, which I'm not going to get into that, but these are alternative. And now people using black fly soldiers also for decomposing. That is a very interesting system, which I didn't include here. And these are different systems. The one in the upper left corner is the one that we have right now at Common Ground High School. We can manage 3,000 pounds of material on a weekly basis. And I wrote some example of that compost that's happening here. But more and more we're going to start seeing this happening if regulations allow for farmers to start incorporating more compost into the farms. When we think about compost, how do we organize our household? How do we organize our farm or our community for composting? So you need to be able to have a place to store your organic waste, whether you use buckets or you use bins. You have to, if you have in your kitchen, you have a pail to be able to collect that. Then you need to have something where to store your carbon base, things that you're going to combine with your fresh food, your leaves, your wood chips, your straws, whatever you're going to be using. You have to somehow have it, get it ready for your raw material. Then you need an active composting area. Where are you going to be blending that material and put it in to be able to start a composting process? And then you have to think, well, once it's ready, I have to take it out from the system. Where should I put it? Should I use it right away? Should I store it? So this is just a diagram to think about your own household and how can I organize space to make, decision that has to be logistically well planned for you to make it easy. If you make it difficult for you, you're not going to do it. But if you plan it well, that you make it second nature, you have to think about these components around composting in your place. Things you can have, you have to think mostly in places that are convenient for you. That is, you can't put it 200 meters away from your kitchen because in the winter you're not going to walk that far under that window. So you have to make it practical. Probably you want to have it in an area shaded in the summer. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of loss of water. This is not so important if you have it covered. But the winter you want it at a place that also is protected from the wind, because the wind might have, if it's a small pile or if it's a small bin, it will be affected by the ambient temperature, unless you keep it alive. Somehow has to be protected from the rain, so you have to have cover. If you leave a compost pile uncovered, it's going to be, and you have a heavy rain, it's just going to be flooded with water, and it's get all the pores of that material is going to be filled with water, and therefore there won't be oxygen for microbes to be able to breathe, and therefore you want to cover it. What else? You might have, in many cases, I see this very often, you might want to have a nice compacted floor or some concrete pad or something that will impede the roots of trees around you to encroach on your compost. I've seen this a lot. You put your compost there, you don't see it for a while, you get to the, you leave it away, and then you come back in 2-3 months and you want to harvest it, and suddenly you have all these roots, because the tree knows, and all the mycelium that's around it says, hey, there's food here, and they will encroach and to take the nutrients that are there, and then you have to fight it. What else? You want to have a good drainage away from wells. If you have leachate, that they shouldn't be coming out from there. And then be a good neighbor. Sometimes people don't like it because, they smell it, or it looks awful, it's not well arranged. There are people concerned about nuisances like odors and rats and other kind of things. And if you do things well, if you follow good management practices, all this it will go away. Anyhow, things that you might want to think of. You certainly have to have a compost system, whether it be a heap, a bin, or a 3-bin system. Something. You need a kitchen pail to be able to capture somehow to hold all that food waste. You need a source of water, whether it be a can or a hose. You certainly going to need something like a shovel or a spade to be able to chop material and to reduce particle size. You're certainly going to need an aerator, something to fluff and provide air into the system, and you're going to know why later on. But these are some of the things that you might want to think of in terms of tools when it comes to composting. I think I showed this already, the different type of composting containers that you might find. So when you think about composting, and these are a lot of technical words, but there are things that you have to think of. What are the type of browns and greens? People tend to just think about, well, greens are my nitrogen-based material, things that has a lot of nitrogen compared to compost, to carbon. And your browns are those materials that has a lot of carbon compared to nitrogen. And you need to balance it in a proportion, okay? When you eat your pasta, you don't eat it alone. You have your proportion of pasta, and then you put some sauce there. And of course, if it's too little sauce and not that right, so you add, and then sometimes you need that, your cheese, and not going to be the Gonzalo one with the Parmesan. So you need to have a balance to have gratification. That happens with microorganisms. They need a ratio where things are optimal for they're able to have two things. One, the energy that comes from carbon, and the nitrogen to be able to build their bodies and grow and reproduce. If they don't have that, it won't happen. They become dormant, they die, and say, these are not the perfect conditions for me. And of course, that's what's called feedstock. What do I have around my house, around my farm, that I can provide in my recipe to be able to create my composting system. One thing that we want to eliminate are heavy metals, GMOs, herbicides, pesticides, PFAS. We're finding a lot of herbicides and pesticides, mostly pesticides in flowers that come from stores. So that's something that I don't accept in my compost. I tend to return it and give it back to people. There's a lot of PFAS, microplastics that are hidden, that I hate, but it seems to be unavoidable at this time. And the industry is catching up now. PFAS comes a lot from all this compostable foodware that comes from fast foods and all these containers They look nice, they even look like paper, but they add all this fluoride to make it sturdy, and so they can retain water, it doesn't leak. So these are things that I want to avoid. Then I have to think about several things. I want to think about particle size, so that's why I chop. My food waste, I use my shovel and reduce the particle size. That will accelerate it. You can put the whole pumpkin there, but it takes a while to decompose. But you chop it, things will add more surface area for microbes to tackle and will decompose much more quickly. The other thing you have to pay attention to what's called bulk density or porosity is that if things are very heavy, food by itself is very heavy, has a lot of water, and has a lot of density. And what happens with that is that there's not much air happening. So things will decompose very anaerobically. And that's all the foul odors that we capture, all that ammonia, and that not so nice odors that come from that. So we have to bulk it somehow. And that's why we mix it with wood chip or leaves to create that structure for air to be able to go through. The other thing we need is moisture. Like a living organism, they need water, they need air, and that's something we have to pay attention to. We have to, aerate the system for things to thrive. And what's going to tell a story is the temperature. Temperature will tell you if things are functioning in your system. Okay, they'll tell a story of what's happening. So when you do composting, you're doing several things. You're balancing your protein, your nitrogen, with your carbon. If you have too much of one, you have to balance that off. Think when you have things that are too wet or too dry, you have to balance them off. So you don't have too much moisture, or you have too very little. The thing with density, so it's a balancing act in the whole process. And this is a diagram that I did several years ago, try to explain, if you understand this, you can do composting anytime. Here's what is key, is that you need your greens and browns in a proportion. When you get very technical, it's called, we refer to proportion of 25 to 30 to 1 carbon. But in reality, it becomes like 2 or 3 buckets of leaves to 1 bucket of green. That's what it boils down to. Okay? The thing gets more complex when you start adding manures and straws and different type of feedstock that are much more diverse, and then that's where you have to calculate a little bit more of those ratios. But in a household, it's very simple. It's 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 where that happens. So you need, again, carbon for energy to fuel the metabolism, and you need nitrogen for the protein, for its enzymatic work, and for microbes to be able to grow. Once you have that nice mixture, you have that blend, you have to pay attention to moisture. Okay? Food already has water in it. When it starts to break down, that water gets released. And food can have between 70% to up to 80% of water. Okay? But your brown, your wood chip, your leaves, your straw that is sitting out there in the sun might not have very little water, and that's where you have to, before mixing, to water it well. Okay? And what we refer here is that we need between 55 to 65% of water content. And I'll explain how you measure that. But anything above that, if it's too much water, things become anaerobic, things start to stink. Okay? Because there's nobody breathing out there. So you are creating conditions for anaerobic conditions to happen, and those are creating the foul odors. If it's below 40 degrees, there's no party, 48%, there's no party going on. The microbes say, listen, I'm thirsty, I'm not going to take these conditions, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm out of this party. And that's it. So watering is always key. And something that I do is that every week while I'm serving my system, I provide water to make sure. I prefer to err on the side of wetness than on the dry side. Because we're always going to have evaporation, we always have a little bit of the leachate happening, so I err on that side. The other thing is to provide aeration, fluffing the material, looking for a tool that allows the air to come in. When you have a small pile, it's easier just through diffusion for air to coming in from the side. But when you have bigger piles, then you have a lot of a situation of anaerobic condition. So we talk about here anything above 5 to 10%. It's aerobic. Below that, we have an issue with that. And there are ways to measure that, but you might need some tools. Here's the best. You know that once a week, the same when you provide for moisture, you provide for air, and you see how that accelerates. If you're doing this right, if you have the mixture right, the oxygen level right, and the moisture level, you're going to see changes in temperature. Whether you have a thermometer, you put the hands in, anything above 90 degrees, you have anything above ambient temperature is that things are happening. There's a party going on. You listen, there's something going on, something's cooking, and that's what's telling you is that the microbes are happy. I'm eating, I'm reproducing, and growing, and when I do that, I breathe, and I produce CO2, I produce water vapors, and I grow and produce heat. That's happening, and then you're happy and you're content. If it doesn't warm up, something's wrong. Then you have to ask yourself, do you have enough greens? Do I have enough carbon? Do we have enough moisture? Do you have enough? So you can troubleshoot depending on how you understand your system. Okay? And this is very, very key to understand. If you understand this, I can leave now. That's it. Go. Okay, where are we? So if we do things right, it's going to happen. There's a whole process that's going to happen. At the beginning, you can see there's the graphic on the left side. You are measuring temperature, and below are the day. When things are cooking, in a matter of 2 days, you can go from ambient temperature to 130 degrees very quickly in a couple of days. And what's happening there is that you have what called mesophilic microorganisms that are tackling those ready available, easy accessible foods. Those sugars, those starches, things that are, and that's what they're starting to break down. Once that population grows and the temperature rises to 125, 130, we started what's called a thermophilic stage, where a different type of population of microorganisms comes into play that are much more tolerant of those temperatures, and they are tackling other types of foods like proteins, like fats, like hemicellulose and cellulose. And after that food has been depleted by the microorganism, you'll see that the temperature of your pile starts to coming down, and we enter into another mesophilic stage where other type of, other microorganisms come into play a role, like the actinomycetes, like the fungi that tackle much more complex carbon, the lignins that are found in woody material. And that could take what's called a curing stage that will take probably 10, 12 weeks or more, depending on the time of the year. So this is just an example of what carbon-nitrogen ratio is, and this is a nice thing to, this is like the proper balance of carbon to nitrogen. Anything above it, things just become a little bit slower. Anything below it, it will get, the composition will be a little bit much faster, but we also lose, a lot of nitrogen in this process. So you don't want that. You want to keep as much nutrients in your compost. So the middle point is the best area to think of. But this is for people like me. By the backyard, you want 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 units. And I like to think of whatever unit you have, where you have a pail, a 5-gallon bin, that's your unit. If you fill up a 5-gallon bin of food scrap, you're going to add 2 or 3 to your mixture. If you want a copy of this slide, just send me an email and I'll be happy to share with you. And this is just an example of that if you balance things right, okay, temperature is going to be pretty high. If you have too much carbon to nitrogen, things are not going to heat up too much because there's not much microbial activity. But if things are well balanced, population microbes are going to be very happy, and that's why the temperature is going to go up. So that balance is very key. These are some of the examples of what we call browns and greens that you might have in your household. There's a long list of them that I don't want to get into, but there's a ways that you can find what is a carbon-rich material and what's a green nitrogen-rich material. There's online, you can find this another way of classifying them on greens, browns, neutrals, and materials that are porous, meaning that you can use it to bulk your mixture. But if you want to find out whether a material is high on greens or is considered brown or neutral, you can go. Where is it? There you go. You can go online. You can find a characteristic of raw material, and you can see carbon percentage and nitrogen percentage and CN ratio of that material. So you can see whether your material is considered high nitrogen or low nitrogen. Food is always high nitrogen, but then if you have a question, coffee ground, for instance, it's not as doesn't have as high nitrogen like food waste and so on. But this is something that you can find online very easily. But again, if you want to have this slide, I'm willing to share it with you. Okay, so things to avoid: perennial weeds. If you're not allowing your compost to heat up, it might not kill weeds. Perennial weeds, it might not. That will linger in your compost. You just don't put it in and avoid that. It's same with disease or insect-infested plant. If you're not managing to the point where you're heating up your compost, it's preferable not to put it in. If you have any treated grass clippings, that you put in pesticide, please don't put it in your system. It says kitchen scraps, meat, fish, and bones. That you find a municipality telling you that. But you can certainly manage kitchen scraps like meat, fish, and bones as long as you're managing properly your system. If not, you might create nuisances, you might attract animals. So if you're actually managing, these are very easy to manage. Same with fat, oils, and grease. It's an issue of proportion. If you put in a whole 5 gallons of oil, that will certainly stunt the whole system. But if it's something that is linked to your food scrap, it's no issue. Things that we don't recommend is the feces of dogs, cats, and pigs and humans, and cat litter is for potential pathogens or medicines that you might have been given to your animals that might linger and not be decomposed. We don't know enough about that. There are people that compost specifically just for the feces of their animals, but they are not selling it to people, or they're using it in their own background. And then, of course, ash or sawdust from chemically treated or painted wood is something you want to avoid. Ash, in the case of ash, the pH of the wood ash is very high, very alkaline, and could result in an alkaline pH that is much too high for your plant needs. So that's something you need to manage slowly. And these are some of what to compost or not. This is what I give to my clients down in New Haven. Things that I want to avoid. So you can actually, if you are into composting, you can actually calculate your carbon to nitrogen. When there are two types of feedstock, like food and leaves, it's very simple. But when you start adding things like muck, where you have a mixture of straw and the feces of chicken mixed with other animal waste, then you need to understand and probably take that to a lab to understand that, the nature of that. How that material will behave. But I just leave you there. This is just an example. I did this just to show you that in my calculation, if I have 20 pounds of food waste and it mixes with 20 pounds of leaves, it ends up being 2 buckets, 2 5-gallon buckets of leaves to 1 bucket of food waste. And my carbon to nitrogen ratio is 29:4. It's a good mix. So this is something that I need to do because I have, this just want to show you that where that comes from, that 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio comes through a calculation. But I need to do this because I manage much more amount of different type of material. This already mentioned of our concern of contaminants. And this is a method that I really recommend. if you have a backyard if you do backyard composting and you do your 3-bin system or you do this plastic container system, I think this is the best method to use. It's called the lasagna method. And basically, you start putting your container on a surface, and you start with stocking material. You can put twigs, you can put branches, you can put wood chips that create a base that is very porous. Because when the compost starts to heat up, just by sheer convection, the warm air is going to draw fresh air in. So you allow for that circulation of coming. So that's why we put that material there. Then after we have that storing material, I tend to put leaves. We have plenty of leaves. That's the best resource you can have. Of course, you have to pick it up in the fall because then they're gone. So if you don't pick it up, that's it, you're done. You have to wait. And then on top of that, I put the green layer. Okay, wherever that material, and you can see that it doesn't go to the edges. Okay, and the reason it doesn't go to the edges is because then you're going to put a cap with the brown material again, and will seal it. So you avoid any odors coming from the side that might attract some vermin or some odors and so on. And you keep on every week that you do. I recommend to do this once a week. You have your pail. Saturday morning, it's your turn. It's your turn. Okay. Go with your pail, and you make sure that you do this. Every time I do this, I put my green, I cap it with my browns, and I water it. And then next week, it's your turn now. Okay, you come in, you put your greens, you put your layer of browns, and then you water it. Once it starts hitting the middle of the pile, that's when I start aerating. There's a nice big corkscrew type of tool where you basically punch, you screw it in, and then you fluff that material. And that will draw air into it. There's another one that's like a spear with a flap that when you turn it, the flap's open, and you also aerate that system. The other thing is you have a fork, fork it in and try to lift it. It's much more difficult. The corkscrew, and then if you have a big bottle of wine, you can always open it to do that. So, and that's how I do it. And it's amazing. You start things, 2 observations. One is the temperature. You can feel it with your hand, or you have to warm it better. And you start seeing that things start to shrink. Things start to decomposing and start to change very quickly. And of course, it gets to a point where you can't add anymore, depending on the size of a household. And that's why a second bin is good, because then you can leave this to rest while you start doing a second one. And when this one is ready and filled up, this is ready to go and be harvested. People have this idea that I've never seen this one. There's a profile where you can see this is a layers that people are putting, and they are not touching it. They're not fluffing it. Okay, so they will tell you, you just open this door, you harvest from below, and you keep adding from the top. But most of the time, is things are not completely decomposed, things are too wet and compacted, things are anaerobic. So I prefer to keep on fluffing it all the time, mixing all this material in, while this second bin is being filled up. And then what you come up is with a very beautiful, nice compost at the end. And of course, another thing that I do is that I just add worms. Worms who love it. You just put it in there and do the work. You're sleeping, you're going to church on Sunday, you're going to a party on Friday, they're working for you. They're working for you as long as you keep them moist, as long as you keep them happy with fresh food, they'll be there for you. This is an example of the bulk density. If things are too heavy, if you don't balance things off very nice, this is an example of, these are aggregates, these are compost particles. And you need space in between them because you need airflow, and then you need this laminate of water around this particle. And there was the magic happen. That's where microorganism lives. If these are too compacted, air won't go through, and you won't have space for water either. So when you see things are smelling and things are too compacted, you have to add some type of bulking material that allows that to create that. But if you do your recipe from the beginning right, you don't need to do that. You're guaranteed that things are going to work out. And this is just an example is that if you don't chop things up, let's say this is a small pumpkin of 6 inches, and you don't chop it up, the temperature is going to go that high because there's not much surface for microbes to work out. But if you chop it, suddenly, those temperatures will go up because there's plenty of surface area to be tackled. Another thing happened is that it's incredible, and I see this because I monitor this. Once you push air into I have chambers where I push air, and I push it, and I can measure the percentage of oxygen in the chamber. In nature, the concentration of oxygen in the air is 21%. Okay. So what happened is that when I push air into the chamber, in a matter of 15 minutes, air gets depleted. You have a lot of microbes breathing and consuming all the air in that pocket. So in a matter of 15 minutes, that's it. Things start becoming in anaerobic conditions. Okay? And if you're not doing this frequently, you're battling with compost that goes into aerobic condition and anaerobic condition. Aerobic condition, and then you have what's called facultative microbes that thrive in both conditions, but they're not the most optimal. So if you frequently aerate, okay, that's why I push air into the chamber, because we're speaking, but every 15 minutes I'm running by blower and things are very aerobic. But if you do it just once a week, what will happen, the things will become much more slower. So this just to show that things can be depleted by oxygen can be depleted if you're not oxygenating your system. Okay, so this is important aeration. We already talked about that. Things that you don't want is to avoid this type of. These are smells that rotten eggs, sour milk, type of decaying flesh. These are type of smells that will come from this microbe when things are are anaerobic, and you want to avoid that. And the best to do that is to aerate your system. Okay. The problem with these systems is that the anaerobic conditions that they create alcohol, and that could be very toxic if you want to use it for your plants. So that's something you want to avoid. Okay. This is the cracker that I was telling you. This is the best tool for winemaking. Sorry, no, for compost. This is great. And then you have these other ones that are in the market. They're tumblers that allows you to do the aeration by rotating. The only problem with the system is that people tend to put more food than carbon base, and then it becomes heavy, and then nobody moves it, and then you see the legs of the tumbler starting to fake, and then you have to call me to try to do something about it. So I don't recommend it unless you manage it properly. But yeah, you need some tool to be able to aerate your system. Moisture is very, very important. We talked about 60 to 65%, and this is a way to do it. It's called the hand squeeze test. You can go and take your hand into the pile, grab a handful of compost, squeeze the material hard, and you're going to check for drips. You're going to release the grip of your hand and smear the material to see if things are they hold together or they break down. So these are the indicators. If you have a material that drips and material sticks together in your hand and is wet and dripping, it's more or less 65% of moisture. If things are glistening and the material sticks together and the hand is wet but not dripping, it's considered 60%. If the material is not glistening and sticks together, it's considered 55%, and if it's crumbly and doesn't stick together, it's around 40% or less. So that's a reference, okay? To be able to, I like, when things are nice like that, that stick together, tells you about the holding capacity of your compost, and there's good conditions for microbes to do the work. Things to pay attention to, I like to use a tarp or lid or some compost cover material that allows you to control the moisture level. 2 days ago, I had to open it up because I didn't want to put chlorinated water into a new batch of compost that I put out. So I let the water come in and to wet my material. But if you leave it over the winter, or you leave it open all the time, you tend to have a lot of water underneath, which will affect the quality of your compost. Okay. One thing that I do is that every time, I didn't explain that on the lasagna method, but if you have already made compost, or compost of the other bin that is already a little bit older, I tend to use a shovel or two and cap it. And that's two things. You are inoculating the new batch with microbes that are already there, so you're jump-starting the system. It captures odors, it captures heat, it captures moisture. So it's a nice way to cap the top of. So every time you prepare a layer, and that's how I do it, I put my browns, my greens, my browns again, and on top of the brown I put compost. And then I water. And then I start all over again. That helps a lot and accelerates the whole decomposition process. Okay. Things to think about: the winter time, people use straw bales or foam, rigid foam material or reflective foil to protect their boxes to avoid getting them frozen. The first year I had a big 4x4, basically a block of ice. It was a Phoenix press, with a hammer and crying. And then, so no, you don't want that. So, and of course, when do I know that my compost is ready? Well, first, your compost, if you aerate it, doesn't heat up anymore. You won't recognize all of the original material. You won't recognize foods. You won't recognize leaves. You might find some eggshells, and you might find things that are much more harder to break down. But you won't be able to. The compost is going to be dark. It's going to be loose. It's going to be crumbly. If you take and go to the supermarket and buy a 70% chocolate cocoa, okay, you go and compare the colors. If it's similar to your 70%, things are good. If it's more to the 40%, things still need more maturing. What it means is that your compost pile hasn't been colonized by fungi, which are responsible for the production of humic acids and fluvic acids that make that compost darker. Okay, so for me it's an indicator. So I always have a 70%. My wife doesn't like 7%; she likes 40. So that's I eat alone. So that's a way to do that. And of course, there are other things that you can do, like a maturity test that allows to measure if things have calmed down and there's no much food there, for microbes to be active and breathing and producing carbon dioxide and ammonia. You can do a germination test to see how good your compost is. You can take cucumbers, you can take radishes, these plants that grow very quickly, and test them and see, the percentage of seed that germinate, and then you can look at how strong they grow. These are things that you can do at home. You can also take a bunch of compost, put it in a bag, seal it, leave it for 5 or 7 days, open it up, and then you can try to smell it. If things that is foul, you have some odors like ammonia, things that still needs to be left alone for that decomposition to end up finished. And these are some examples of uses of compost. There's a lot of information there out in the internet. So that's it. It's all about this for me. Is how can we link urban waste with where we actually grow food? When you take food scraps from your kitchen and make compost and bring it to your garden, it's not the same unless you're producing food. For me, is that each time a farmer is harvesting, they are taking all those nutrients that are up into the plants are being taken out of the soil, and that the nutrition, those nutrients have been uptaken by the plants, somehow needs to be replenished. And for that, we need to bring organic waste back, organic matter back. We need to build up the soil biology into place to keeping that nutrient cycling happening. So these are photographs of a place in Phoenix Press. All that food was being produced on top of asphalt. And we had wonderful farmers, women farmers, that were producing 16,000 pounds of food on top of asphalt. And I was happy to contributing with Compost to keep up that production. But that what kept me motivated along the way. So that's it. Any question for me? Any questions? Yes.
So, yeah, I've got a tumbler system, and clearly, vegetables and things which we prepare our foods with go in there. But what about the scraps, the ores? Can those all go in there, like leftover rice and leftover onions and spices and things like that? Can that go in also?
Yes. Listen, you can keep all that into your bin before you feed your tumbler. And if you follow the rule of 2 to 1, so whatever you have in your bin, whether it be half or full, put the same in, double it in with your leaves. The leaves are your best help there. Because you don't need wood chip because, the wood chip is good because the wood chip is food for fungi. So it will just add, you want diversity in your compost. As much as diversity, like twigs, like, fresh leaves, old leaves, anything you can think of, even, diversity goes a long way because you don't know what microbes are helping out there that are playing a role in all those benefits that I was telling you. But if you do the proportion right and you keep it moist and you're aerating, once a week, things will go nicely very quickly. The things that, like seeds, for instance, like things that from the beer, the spent grain, seed has very high nitrogen level. Those will ignite those systems very quickly. So pay attention to when things heats up very highly or things when they're very slow. You need to provide your system foods that are like sugars that are very readily available for microbes to things keep going. But the aeration and moisture is if you guarantee that, things goes very easily. The problem with those systems is that you can only put so much food waste because then they become very heavy to turn, That's why the ones on the floor, they're much easier to manage. Of course, you have to aerate in a different form. But I see mostly people don't pay attention to putting and adding the proper proportion. And then things are heavy, are smelling, I cannot turn it, and then you wasted like $400 in the system. Yeah.
I have two questions. My first one is, pros or cons when we're talking about the brown carbon, using like newspaper or brown paper bags in here?
Yeah, you can put browns, paper bags, your white papers, your paper towels. There are some paper towels that have bleach, for instance. But it's not that you put in a lot of rolls, so it's all about proportion.
Sure.
And they will get neutralized very quickly. But yes, your cardboard, as long as you're cutting it, reducing the particle size, if you put in a lot of paper and you're not breaking it down, it will just take much longer.
Sure. And then the other question is, so if we're planning on using our compost in our food gardens, do you find any concern about composting in plastic containers? The containers that are not made out of.
Yeah, listen, that's a good discussion. The honest answer is I don't know. And we use plastic because it's very convenient for us, but I don't know if that's releasing any type of plastic into the system. So I have a friend of mine that has now a composting system in New Jersey, and she just uses metal plastic, metal containers, because she feels that plastic is very difficult to avoid. Here it's about not so much plastic in the soil, it's us consuming that plastic also. So microplastic, the release of dioxide, dioxin, that's my concern. If you can avoid them, the best. But if you're just transporting stuff, I wouldn't concern. But if things are sitting there for a long, long time, and you know, food become very acidic, and they can be, you know, affecting metal, they can be affecting plastic in a particular way. So as long as they're not sitting, you know, for a long, long time, it shouldn't be that concern. But honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing is, who's the best storyteller of yourself? If your plant is growing, if they're healthy, if they don't have any pathogens, if your crops are nice and edible and taste good, you know, those are the best indicators that things are doing right. We are going blinded. We are working with nature, but nature is the one that's guiding the process. We think we're doing it. It's nature that's guiding the process, and you just need to learn how to read the indicators that things are fine. So.
Thank you.
I have a question. So the 3-bin system, you recommend it to be solid, the sides be solid? Because
No.
mine is like, use like chicken wire.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The only thing with chicken, I mean, the pros and cons. The system that I have, they're closed because I push air and I don't want the air to escape. I want the air to go through. But if you have a chicken wire or you have the open pallets, you have diffusion, you have air coming from outside. But also you might have some animals that might want to encroach. Oh, there's nothing smelling good. You might have some mice coming in, you know, poking and checking this out. Or if you have food that are into the edges, you know, that might generate some odors and so on. But again, if you're managing this, if you're turning this on a weekly basis, and you're watering, animals doesn't go there, honestly. First, animals don't like things that are being moved all the time. They want natures that are much more stable. So if they are once a week, you're moving the material and you're watering, things are starting decomposing, and then yeah, you'll be fine. Okay? You'll be fine. What else? Any other question? Yes?
Do you have a recommendation for using wood ash in like moderate volumes? I understand it'll bring the pH up if you don't.
Listen, what I would do is that I will put I'll put it on a side, and I just add it, you know, a cup or two every time I'm providing. You know, it certainly adds, you know, nutrients. I just don't want to overwhelm the system. So yeah, you know, I would add 1 or 2 cups for each batch, depending on the volume of what you're producing. But it goes a long, long way. And you know, compost, the other thing is that it will balance off itself. It's amazing. I've been doing this for 10 years. Every time I test, it's always neutral. I don't know how it does it, but somehow microbes create conditions to be neutral for them to be able to survive. If things too acidic or too alkaline, they won't have it. In nature, something that I didn't explain, there's a whole succession. When you look at depleted or areas that have very low biomass, vegetation cover, that tends to be dominated by a lot of bacteria. If you go to the other extreme, and it's very acid, okay? If you go, very alkaline. If you go to the other side, to the forest, you're going to find a lot of fungi, very dominated by fungi, the soil. And that's tend to be the opposite. You know, you're going to have much more alkaline. Yeah. So you have a succession there. When you do composting, you're combining all these elements, and they tend to average. And that has to do because you're looking for a ratio, at least for farming, where you have a 1-to-1 proportion of bacteria to fungi. You don't want to, unless you're growing plants that are more that likes more like shrubs, like trees. You know, some plants that like more fungi in the soil. Then you have to, you know, perk it up. You have to look for ways to do compost where you add more of your fungi, and there's ways to do that. But yes, you know, the ash, I think if you do it, you know, consciously, not adding too much, it shouldn't be an issue. Yes.
You mentioned before about the spent grains from breweries.
Yeah.
or coffee grounds, do you do any programs with local places to pick up their stuff?
Sometimes I like to diversify, so I go down to the New England brewing, and I steal. No, I don't steal. I ask because the pig farmers, they go there and they get to use it.
Okay.
So I always kind of take up, and that's very heavy.
Yeah.
But creates a nice diversity. That's what I'm looking. I'm always adding. I also have a mother pile. A pile that I know is nice, full of microorganisms that I tend to check on the microscope. That I want to see my fungi, my bacteria, my nematode, my protozoa, my flagellates, my amoebas, things are cooked. And then I take a little bit of that, and in the new batch, I just pour a little bit on top.
Do you go to coffee places too and take those?
Yeah, we have a coffee place. So I try to diversify and hoping that once I put this into the ground, I optimize the potential benefits. Common ground, if you know that place, they have a big farm, but it's a very sandy soil, soil. And they used to have a composting system before the one that we built. And they were just dragging, all that sand into the compost and putting it back in the system. And now they're finding that the percentage of organic matter is growing. And this year we're going to have, I'm very excited because I'm going to be involved with 5 farms across Connecticut where we're going to start using compost teas to apply for farms. And we're going to be measuring some parameters around of plant health and yields. So I'm excited to go beyond or just doing compost. The good thing about your compost, and I have a good example here, is that you can take by the way, look at this beauty. Like this is how it holds. This is a batch that probably has 12 to 16 weeks, and it's nice and moist, and it holds. That tells you the good property. It starts to feel like plastiline, and that's full of life. So you take, how do you call it, cheesecloth or a painter strainer cloth, and you put good compost in it, and you put it under the water and just massage it, like beautiful organic acid. And you massage it and you release all those microbes into the water, and then you take your container and just put in your plants. Okay? So you don't need to have compost for all your land, if it's because you probably waste a lot of pounds of compost. But you can, if you have good compost, you can spread it along the way using that method of what's called compost extract. Yeah.
I have a question about the Hills and Wheels composting. So you have like a crew of folks who go around, right?
I hired hardcore people. I have Anna. Anna has 11.
How do you teach them? It's like,
How do you teach
to
them?
identify, like, those are store-bought flowers, don't take them, right? Is it a
Oh.
lot of,
Yeah, so I have a list of things that what to compost, what not. We have an app on a phone, which the biker goes around. They have a route, so they know where to stop.
And you're in more than one place, you're in East Rock, right? And in
Yeah, we go to Spring Glen, we go to East Rock, Prospect Hill, Fairhaven, Westfield. We have several. And I tend to pick up people that also live close by, and they're hardcore bikers, people that love just bike, and then say, "I get to pay. You pay to bike." Nobody gets paid to bike unless you're a professional bike. But yes, I train my bikers to recognize what's compostable, what not, and to flag it. So this application will tell my composter, the client, but I call it composter, and it tells you the day I went there, at what time, what day, the weight of the bin, and then if there's something awkward like a plastic bag or a fork or something, we'll flag it, and we take a picture, and then we write a note. And some people say, they apologize, "Oh, I'm sorry." And there are people say, "That's compostable." Okay. And then we can start a little argument over email, and then we get to learn from each other, and so far no issue. But yes, that's the only way, is that, and that probably happened for the first 2 weeks, but then the biker gets to know and recognize it. And of course, The biker can overlook that, you know, because that's an extra type of job. But they're committed to, I never actually recruited anybody. People that work with me have come to me and said, well, I want to do what you're doing. So they're already motivated with the biking and doing things right, and therefore I haven't had any issues with that. So.
How many client composters do you have right now, total?
Like a client, okay, like 500. Yeah, 500.
That's amazing.
And this is not statistics. Happy Women's Day.
Thank you.
93% of the people that compose with me are women.
Really?
Yeah.
At least their names are there.
Hooray for women.
The names are there. They are the ones that are calling. I don't know if they're paying, but certainly I don't do any marketing, but the names are there and say, thank you. You know, there are people that's my community, the people that really want to make a change. Yes.
So you mentioned I have chickens, and I haven't quite figured out how to take the chicken waste and incorporate that into my compost. And
Is your chicken mixed with shavings, with other, or it's just pure manure?
So I try to lift just the manure and to get very little of the shavings.
Okay.
When I first started, I did it with both. I would just I do a deep litter method.
Yeah.
So a lot of that breaks down over the winter
Yeah.
anyway. So pretty soon in the spring, I'll be taking
Yeah.
all of that out. And it's really broken down quite a bit. But I try to just keep mostly just the manure because I don't want to overwhelm the system.
Yeah.
But it just
Well, the thing with the manure itself is that it's very unstable. Has a lot of nitrogen, very high nitrogen, and needs to be balanced. So when it comes with the wood shaving or the bedding, you know, you have a carbon-based material that you mix it in, and then by itself, you know, if you given time, things will break down.
Okay.
If you're just picking out the manure, you have to mix it in with some type
Leaves or
of
something.
carbon.
Okay.
You know, whether it be straw, whether it be leaves or wood chips, and have it into a place that, whether it be a heap or a container, that we're allowed to do that. And the same thing, you have to keep the moisture, you have to aerate. I have my friend Brenda, she just keeps a heap and doesn't touch it. And let nature take its course. And then suddenly it's ready to go. But it will take some time. But if you want to accelerate that, then you have to think about these elements. We think about proportion of browns and greens. We think about providing moisture. You're thinking about providing oxygen. And things will happen in a speedy way. If not, things will just decompose very, very slowly. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
How about during the winter? My compost seems to go very, very slowly.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Just don't worry about that. It just.
You know, what I was telling you, there's something called, you know, a lot of microbes, fungi, and other microorganisms. They just create cysts. They become and protect themselves. I'm going to go to sleep. And you know, I'm not going to even go out there. It's too cold, and they become dormant. Unless you know you manage the system. So if you're aerating and they'll be active. But if you're not adding anything, you know, things too cold, and if the system is too small, it will be affected by the ambient temperature. So things will be too cold. It's not that they cannot heat up. It's that you know, it's the cold is too cumbersome, and they cannot grow. You're not adding anything else. But once the temperature starts to come in, they start becoming dormant, coming out and becoming alive again, and they will pick up. That happened to our soil. You know, one of the reasons I learned this with farmers is that, you know, things doesn't really get going with the natural systems until things really heat up. Anything above 55, 65 degrees on the soil, that's when microorganisms, oh yeah, great. Below that, people plant, but they have to provide nitrogen to jumpstart the system because microbes are not doing their job. You know, I'm not going to take nitrogen from the air. You know, it's too cold outside. But and that's why they feed nitrogen in the very beginning. But you don't need to, unless you can warm up somehow the soil. Yeah. So yeah, let it be. Let it be. In my case, I do composting year round. I have a big system that gets insulated. You know, I'm moving that material, and right now I can see on my app it's 160 degrees on the 2 bays. and I'm happy. And say, I'm gonna go to Woodbridge and talk. In the meantime, nature's taking its course.
When the ambient temperature is below freezing, does that change how much water you want to put into the system? Does it increase the likelihood that it'll be too cold if you add too much water into it?
No, listen, as long as things are alive, if you're not moving it, if you're not aerating, the water will freeze, that's certainly. But again, the minimum size you want to have a system that will create some insulation into the core of your compost is a box of 3 by 3 by 3. Anything smaller than that, it will just no, it won't work. It's just a pure physics. So in my case, I have 8 by 12 by 6, so it's really nicely insulated, and it generates so much heat that sometimes you have snow on top and it will just melt. So it's kind of cool. And sometimes I use the same ice, the same snow, and if I can't water it, I just take the snow and shovel it on top, and then things melt very nicely. So it's a management system, and it's if you bring it up to a second nature in your household, like you're brushing your teeth, like taking the trash out, it doesn't take long. We have a system at the UU down in New Haven. We have bins, and every time we garden once a week, that's when we service it. It takes 10 minutes to do so, and we get to use that compost. That's really, really neat.
Do you recommend any particular setup in terms of having like a kitchen bin and an outdoor bin or anything like that? I think for your pickups, right, you use it.
For the pickups, I pick, this I do. I'm the only one, I'm part of a community composting community nationwide. I'm part of the steering committee. And you have non-for-profit, you have for-profit, you have churches, you have community garden, people doing composting, and we're always discussing what's the best method of doing stuff. And everybody gives 5-gallon bins. I give 3.5 gallon bins. And the reason is what? Because I force people to chop. If I give you a 5-gallon bin, you're going to put me a tank in there. But if you give it a 3.5 gallon bin, you have to chop it. And that's why you're called composter. You're not client, I'm not calling you a client. And that helps a lot because it facilitates. They start composting by setting aside the food scrap and reducing particle size. So anything depends on the volume. You have if you're alone, you have a couple, or you have family, then it all depends on how much you generate. So understanding how much you generate per week is important. So all my composters produce between 8 to 10 pounds per week. I have a crazy woman, sorry for that, but a woman that has been there from the beginning, and she was herself with a dog, and she would produce a 5-gallon bin of food. And then she got married and had 2 kids, and then she produced 2 full gallon bins of food, and it's heavy, it's like 40 pounds, and I just hate to pick it up from, I tried to come up with a conversation, how can you reduce so much stuff? But she loves cooking, but I see also that she throws away a lot of stuff. So anyhow, it's all about how much you produce that is manageable for you, that you can carry, and then you bring it outside. The system outside, I really like the cylinder type of plastics. They are dark, they have lids, it's easier. Once I want to harvest it, you just lift it. So it's easy to tackle. I don't need to go into that little door to be able to harvest it. I just harvest in full and get to use it, and then put it back in place. With the square ones, you tend to have edges that it's sometimes difficult to have access to. They work very well. I also have the metallic mesh. I put a lot of my leaves in those nice cylinders, so they look nice and neat in the corner or on the side, and it's easier for people when we go to garden to put it in there instead of having a heap. The problem with the heap is that the heap tends to run off, but with this container they decompose there too. So by the end of, before the fall season, things are really nice and broken down already. So it depends on your on what you want to do. But what else? What else I can tell you about composting? It smells good. And what did I tell you about the compost? I didn't bring my chocolate, but you know, that's look pretty brown to me.
Can you turn that towards the camera so we can get a look on for the recording?
Yeah,
Right in there, yeah.
there you go. I would say 65% chocolate, this one. And this has like
Thank you.
three weeks before I give back to people. So that's a fun part because then, you know, people that have been contributing, have been paying for the service, now they want to grow food, they want to grow to the garden, and they come and pick up, you know, their bags of compost, and we have a conversation, and they they come to pick up. That means that they have to shovel in their own compost in the bags, so they have a sense of what it entails, their work, and we have a conversation. And how was your garden last year? How was the tomato? Oh, they were great. You know, and so that's part of doing this, is that you also support a community that supports you by giving back through compost. So
Can we hire you?
hire. Listen, this guy.
Pilot program here in town?
Yeah,
as-
pilot program?
As long, one neat program that I always had in mind, imagine that and I think you started this some years ago, where you buy these containers in
Yeah.
bulk,
Right, right.
but then you can have somebody that can help go around and help troubleshoot. If things are not right, you know, then I can go, you know, for a little fee, for an hour or whatever, and see what's happening and check out things and probably help you out. Until until when you start biking by yourself, you know, that kind of thing. That type of troubleshooting. You know, sometimes I get called, listen, I'm sorry, I know what to do, but I couldn't do it because I was busy, we were traveling, and then, you know, I pick up that food scraps that are not completely decomposed, and they jumpstart the system again. I would like to see more of that happening, but that you need a community that's willing to do that.
So do you know of any smaller towns that have everybody, the residents bring it all to one place and manage it themselves?
I think Middletown, but I mean, they do a lot of collection in transfer stations, but now it tends to be put into a container and goes to an aerodigester.
Goes to the
So,
Oh, I thought West Haven had, does West Haven have aerobic digestion?
yes,
Their transfer
yeah,
station?
I started to work with
Atlas?
Haven,
Okay.
with Atlas, but you know, they do good in terms of managing their leaves and the wood chips. They have the machinery, but the issue was to incorporate food waste, and that meant that you were asking union workers to add a layer of work without any new compensation. Okay, so they sabotage the whole effort because you say, you want me to do this, it's going to put me more work, I have to add more skills, but you know, I'm going to be paid the same. Why should I do that? That was the questioning that they were making.
And they weren't willing to
Listen, they
hire
didn't,
more people.
they were not willing to, they were just cutting people. So you had, and of course something happened in the city, they had to run to pick up stuff, so they will abandon the whole site. So they were thinking of privatizing it or, you know, leasing it. I know Brewers Compost was behind it. They now finally found a piece of land to do that. But in our region, you know, a place like West Haven would be great. Now, the Atlas was going to be an interesting proposition, but somehow I remember trying to train go and do any type of training information, and people will show up late or won't show up, and then, you know, wouldn't do the mixing or put things not right. And then I learned after interviewing them, I actually paid one of the workers, listen, I'm going to pay you $60 for you to sit down with me in an hour. Okay, and they sit down, and that's when I understood, okay, that's why you don't do it. And it was an issue of union labor issues. People not being paid, their salary had been remained the same, and they basically were sabotaging the whole thing another way. And to the point that the person that was bringing the grants in, you know, he left the West Haven government. Said, I'm not going to do this anymore. It was a sad proposition. So for me, it's that how can we start small? Imagine we have other Peas on Wheels in other communities. I mean, I only want to grow so far. I want my weekends also, I want to my vacation time, and I do it to the people. I don't go there and try to convince you compost with me. Suddenly I give a call, hey, listen, I want compost, I'll go and work with you. I only work with those that are willing to make a change, and hopefully I'll inspire others to do similar. And for me, it's, it's all this linkage, it's all this is linking to the community that I like to see. But in the meantime, we have Blue Earth Compost that's trying to do things right at the scale, and they know it, and that's why now they're investing in land, because they want to change the script of how they've been doing things. I just don't imagine myself driving up and down the state of Connecticut in a big truck. I will kill myself first. I prefer to bike around.
Yeah.
Anyhow, but listen, anything you can do here, the space, the farms here, that if they have the correct incentive, they might, set aside land for composting. There's regulation right now that impedes you to receive food scrap from, there's a certain amount of food, what they call off-farm material that you can receive. So somehow the state of Connecticut wants you to start composting, and they're doing they have increased the amount of compost they're collecting, but they're not creating incentive to create grounds for actually composting. So 40% of organic waste is going elsewhere, but there's no incentive to create new land, new spaces, not allowing farmers to do composting. Farmers could be an added value to what they produce. There's a farm up in Vermont. They do food collection, they feed that to pigs, and they feed it to chicken. What they don't eat, they bring it and do composting, they put it into the ground, they produce food, they do vermicompost. I mean, they have a diversified economy within their own farm. And why can't we do it here?
So what you're saying is there's a regulation against
That impedes the,
somebody like me bringing something to a farm,
Yeah.
my scraps to
Yeah.
a farm?
The farmer can't take it from you.
yeah. I mean, you can take it as long as nobody knows, but once it knows, then,
Yeah, so like Massaro, for instance, if he got caught taking that from Woodbridge residents, then
Change that, right?
he'd get,
Well,
it is
because there could be
backwards.
cross-contamination, you could use things that
Not if you
include.
compost it correctly.
Yeah.
But even if there were like pesticides and fertilizers
Yes.
and things like that.
It's-
Because he's.
with the
he's
case of
organic.
Certified organic.
with the case of Massaro is that they're organic certified, so they're very concerned of the quality of the stuff that comes out.
But also-
Common Ground is not organic certified, but it's all organic grown.
But there was a pig farm, right, that was out, I think it was,
It's in
past
Bethany
Madison,
now.
Old Saybrook, I want to say, like one of the towns there was collecting their food waste
Yeah.
and Blue Earth was bringing it to a pig farm.
Yeah, there's some pig farms that are receiving material. The state
even
of Connecticut
like-
doesn't seem to be concerned about pigs eating that stuff.
Yeah.
Organic stuff, organic farms, they're concerned, but other pigs, we can feed them some plastic and stuff. So, and the thing with Blue Earth Compost, and this, they're a friend of mine, is that when each time I go to your home with my bucket, I can see what you put in, and I can talk to you and say, listen. But when you have these big containers, you're not going to go through what's there. So my concern is what happens with you have to pick it by hand, so small is beautiful in my case,
Yeah.
and that large, I think we need to find a solution for that.
Yeah, they had two different models that they were using. They could do like the residential pickup with like the 5-gallon bucket, and then they dump it into their truck, but
Yes,
there's
right.
not really much interface with the customer. They're just coming along the same time, they
Yeah.
have like your trash pickup or whatever. And then they had another one where they'd go to transfer stations with not a 96-gallon, maybe like a, I don't know, 50-gallon or something toter. And as long as you had the bio bags, you could fill it up and drop those in. So the bio bags were clear, so as they pulled them out, they could see
Yeah.
what was going in or what was going out. But then again, they were lining those with regular plastic and not bioplastic bags. So,
Yeah.
it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, yeah. Now you have these systems that they pay as you go in certain municipalities, where you get provided with a certain amount of bags. That's where you put has certain color, and that's where you put your organics. But then you put your trash with those bags in this that is being picked up by the same truck. then it goes to the transfer station, and
And they sort them.
they sort them out. But my question is, what happens if you run out of bags? And you don't, and then, because you're paying for those bags.
Yeah.
So the tendency is just to put it in the regular trash bag, so.
Yeah, those were pilots that they were doing with
That-
the deep
so,
bin.
yeah.
That
It didn't work
folks
out?
didn't like it after they had to pay for
There's a mix, what they measure is participation.
Mhm.
They don't measure, the quality of what
Quantity.
being compost. Is if people like it. So far we have devolved the responsibility of management of our waste to the cities and the municipalities. And we expect that through the payment of our taxes is enough. But we know that a lot of our towns and cities are, under budgeted. So we want some extra stuff, but we're not willing to pay more for it. And for me, I was able to convince the community to say, listen, I want to make a change. I want to invest this because this changes my quality of life. Now I have people that call me, listen, I'm more concerned because each time I'm going to go to a friend's house, they don't have compost, so I have to bring my own bag and take my compost back home because they have changed it. They don't remember the last time they put food scrap in a trash. Now, they are like with a little bag, what do I do with this? So they put it in the purse and then they have to wait till home to be able to trash it. That's the kind of thing. I also had compost in the school, in School Spring. And at the beginning, the kids, this smell. Now you have the kids putting their hands in and bringing the buckets and pouring it. And now I have parents from the school. Listen, Domingo, my kid is nagging me that we should do compost at home like we do you guys do in the school. So we have to also incorporate a new culture within a new generation that can see this. This is the only way we can do this. We have to stop the mainstream of how we have
Right, so we do have compost, we have food waste diversion at Beecher, Blue Earth picks up. We're working on it for the high school at Amity, and the middle school actually, for the people that was here that left, there's actually some Girl Scouts at the middle school right now who are working on getting it going at the middle school. So it's, when it happens with the kids interested, just like with anything.
Yeah.
If it's actually people who are interested doing it and who are the stakeholders, it
Yeah.
makes a big difference, so.
And you mentioned something very important because it's food diversion.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah, we are not composting.
because people say,
It's not
we're doing composting at school. No, wait a minute, there's a step
Sadly, no.
here.
We wish we
There's a
were.
step, because, we want to guarantee that actually composting, you have to ask where that food's growing. And we have to be honest. We're not composting it, we're doing something else with it, and that's important.
But also
Well,
in that, more things have come, there's actually Havens Harvest picks up some of the excess food that's
Yeah.
not used. So it's much more, it is food waste diversion. It's not everything, we're decreasing food waste
Yes.
anyways.
The food waste that goes to for anaerobic digestion over quantum biopower, they're extracting the methane out of there intentionally, they're not adding the air, right? So they can get the methane to generate energy, which still I know has a negative impact on the environment, but they also it also will create a compost.
That's it, that's what they say. But they've been in business for a while, and I know there's a composting facility on the side, people that do mulches and stuff. But I haven't seen anybody, first I haven't seen any bags that are linked to Quantum.
Oh, they said they sell it to Scots.
They said it too?
Scots.
Yeah, I don't know, I would like to follow on that.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact,
curious,
I was reviewing some USDA grants last year, and it was for anaerobic digesters, and they recognize, listen, what's coming from outside, what's cold digest, is not ready to be used, has to be processed, and it requires another layer. So I would like to see what's happening with that. Yeah.
I think we need to wrap up because the library's going to
Yeah,
close soon.
Can I just
Yeah.
suggest maybe in the future, we do something in the spring or in the fall, and maybe make it more like a hands-on.
You want to touch that, you want to touch that compost.
Go ahead, don't touch the compost.
Bring a pail of food scraps or whatever, and then you have us have the children or the adults.
Well, the kids already know how to do
Prepare
it.
a batch.
That's
Prepare a batch.
Yes,
good enough.
bags.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.